So our first speaker tonight is Alicia Jrapko. She came from Argentina during the dictatorship of the 70s and started doing solidarity work with Cuba in the United States in the early 90s. Alicia is the U.S. coordinator and of the International Committee for Peace, Justice, and Dignity, previously known as the International Committee for the Freedom of the Cuban Five. She's one of the co-chairs of the National Network on Cuba. She is part of the Secretariat of the Network of Intellectuals, Artists, and Social Movements in Defense of Humanity, and also a co-editor of Resumen Latinoamericano, an online publication about Latin America with articles written by people living in those countries and translated into English for the U.S. audience. Alicia was very involved in the case of the Cuban Five, visited one of the Cuban Five in prison in Victorville, California, regularly from October 2002 until his release. Please welcome Alicia Jrapko.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with all of you. I know you all are activists and have worked for years in different struggles, so it's good to be here. There's a lot of things going on in Latin America, so there's a lot to talk. But I don't want to go too long because I want to have time. First of all, Paul will also talk, but also people can ask questions if they have questions later, which would be nice. By coincidence, total coincidence, today there are elections in my country, Argentina. And I have been in touch with friends and family members, and everybody's very excited because it seems like the formula Fernandez won in the first round, so they're not going to have to go to a second round. They won, and people are celebrating in the street right now as we gather here. And, this election is very close to my heart because I left Argentina in the 70s during the bloody dictatorships in South America. And I think I was one of the few lucky ones to be able to tell the story. This election is one example of the pushback against the neoliberal advances in Latin America. In virtually every country of the region, there are major struggles breaking, which each one with their characteristic. In the case of Argentina, it is an electoral face-off between the people who are burdened with the $45 billion debt to the International Monetary Fund that generations of workers and poor will be obligated to pay for decades. While the form of resistance is different in each country, the war is not that complicated to understand. On one side, you have the political, military hegemony of Washington with the IMF, the multinational corporations with their scripted media, the local oligarchies, and the compliant organization of the American states with their puppet general, Secretary Luis Almagro, that for any of you that speak Spanish, we call him Almugre. So on the other side are the workers, the unions, the farmers, the students, the impoverished, the retired trying to maintain their pensions, and the indigenous communities protecting to the death their lands against the appetite of the empire. This formula is not new. It has been going on for 200 years, since the Monroe Doctrine of 1823, I'm sure you are familiar with, when the US declared that Latin America was the backyard and it would not tolerate competition from the European capitalist countries, nor uprisings from the population. This mindset from Washington of the America for the Americans has not changed one bit. And with the decline of the capitalist system, they are acting with open and desperate impunity. I'm sure many of you remember that about 20 years ago, there was a progressive wave in Latin America that brought hope to the poor. It was a time of integration among countries, with Hugo Chávez's Bolivarian Revolution in Venezuela partnering with Fidel and socialist Cuba being the impetus. And it included Néstor Kirchner in Argentina, Lula da Silva in Brazil, Evo Morales in Bolivia, Rafael Correa in Ecuador. There were progressive regional coalitions formed like CELAC, ALBA, Mercosur, and there were integration forms where countries will share what they have with respect and trust. What made that possible has been traced back to the Cuban Revolution of 1959, when the US lost a prime colony that Washington has never forgotten or forgiven. This was a revolution that took a qualitative leap on April 16, 1961, after US planes bombarded Havana, when Fidel declared, quote, "Because what the imperialists cannot forgive us for is that we are here, and that we have made a socialist revolution right under the very noses of the United States." That's what Fidel said there. Cuba's human principle, vision, and direction took hold in the entire region and remain today despite the setback. Cuba chose to organize society in a different way, something that US do not tolerate. Now we are seeing hopeful signs that the tide is turning again towards humanity and away from the system of profit. I am hope that you have heard about what is taking place in Chile. While you could not find a war in the mainstream media in the United States, on Friday there were 1 million people in the street. 1 million people in the street in a country of 18 million is 1 every 18 people in the street. It was very amazing. And everybody is asking for the resignation of the president, Sebastián Piñera, who has done awful things for Chile. And Chile, until recently, was like a model for the IMF. There was I don't know if you were able to follow the news, but there was an incredible repression against people in the street. They were being shot. People were shot in the street in Chile by the military and the police. People are still in the street, and we don't know what is going to happen. Today, all the ministers resigned, but the guy is still there, and we hope that he's going to go, and then people can choose who really can represent them. So the uprising started, as you may know, by young students who were upset about the price of the metro tickets. But, you know, it was just not that. That's what sparked the demonstrations, right? Like you say in English, it was the straw that broke the camel's back, and now Chile is burning. It really is. And, it brings tears to my eyes when I see the demonstrations because, when we were in Argentina in the 70s, and Chile, of course, has the coup in 1973, we knew that it was not over. What happened was not over. And now all these young people are coming out, and it's wonderful to see. The US is speechless about Chile. But meanwhile, in Bolivia, the US is trying to target and undermine a legit government that was recently elected by the people. And he won in the first round. And they came out with this idea that there was fraud. They never recognize when a government win, a popular government win, they don't want to recognize it. And so now they're trying to figure it out what to do with Evo. That, by the way, is very loved by the people in his country, in Bolivia. But the opposition doesn't want to recognize Evo. So they're trying to come up with some kind of formula to get him out. You're going to hear there's going to be strikes. The opposition doesn't want to give up. But he won. And they say that one of the things that we hear is that they stop the counting and then they start counting again. But, they don't talk about these boats were coming from very far away in areas where there are not too many people. And, they have difficulties in going to the places to vote. So they needed a time to count those votes, but no, they're coming and saying that it's fraud. One of the things that they use in Venezuela is to try to bring somebody unknown and self-proclaimed president. They use it in Venezuela and they want to use it in Bolivia as well. So we don't know what is going to happen there, but in the meantime, people are mobilized to support their president. They elected, and the United States should respect that. I should mention that since 2006, when Evo Morales arrived, Bolivia has a faster growing economy in South America that has allowed Bolivia to reduce poverty by 42% and extreme poverty by 60%. Similarly, 2 weeks ago in Ecuador, I don't know if you were following, there were massive demonstrations also against President Lenín Moreno. Lenín Moreno was part of the government of Correa. But unfortunately, he is a traitor. And he has betrayed the people of Ecuador. Instead of continuing with the policy that Correa had, he made a big deal with the IMF, and he capitulated. And now they have a $4.5 billion debt with the IMF. And who's going to pay for it? I don't have time here to go over each single example and country, but you can see I'm trying to go to the title of this talk, that the doctrine of humanitarian intervention and who are the targets of US imperialism. Just going a little bit back, in 2009 in Honduras, with the Obama administration back ouster of progressive Manuel Zelaya, a landowner who became president and then turned to the left, he went even further by signing Honduras with Petrocaribe, which was one of those integration groups that started, and later on supported ALBA also. The legacy of that coup in Honduras is that today thousands of Hondurans are forced to immigrate north out of fear, while thousands more protest the regime of the narco dictator Juan Hernandez, who stole the elections in 2017. Of course, you never heard the United States talk about that. They never talk about stolen elections in other countries. They only talk about Venezuela right now. This coup, this coup started a trend of conservative restoration throughout Latin America, followed by the parliamentary coup in Paraguay against Fernando Lugo, in Brazil against Dilma Rousseff, and at the same time, the lawfare judicial war. I wanted to just say a few words about that. Like, one of the methods used is through the legal system to oust the people that they don't want there. And so it has been used against progressive leaders like Brazil, Lula da Silva. As you know, Lula is still in jail. The most loved person in Brazil, the people that has done so much for his people, and he is in jail right now. The same thing happened with Cristina in Argentina. They tried to do the same thing to Cristina through the court, and Rafael Correa in Ecuador. In Brazil, the right wing managed, with lies, the use of social media, and corrupt lawyers to put Lula in jail, like I said before, with no proof of anything wrongdoing. The only problem was that he was so popular that they knew he was going to win the elections if he ran, so they put him in jail before the election so he could not run. But it's not over, because people in Brazil are fighting back. In August this year, a few months ago, hundreds of thousands of Brazilians took to the street in 211 cities around the country. And you know, you probably are aware that now the president of Brazil is a fascist, Jair Bolsonaro, who is doing the same thing that all other countries are doing in Latin America, you know, working with the IMF and being supported by the United States. So what is the current situation? We never put our hope in the United States government or Congress, but definitely Trump has gone beyond anything imaginable. During his time in office, there was a State Department attempt to undermine the government of Nicaragua not too long ago, if you remember. But no other country has faced the intensity of what can only be described as economic warfare, quite like Cuba and Venezuela. You know, the US always have a reason to go after Cuba. You remember Obama moved forward a little bit, you know, with President Raúl Castro, and the Cuban Five were free then, and you know, things were moving forward, but Trump is undo any little progress made by Cuba. And now the pretext is that Cuba is helping Venezuela, and that there is a lot of military in Venezuela that are Cubans helping. But it's a big lie. Everybody knows it's a big lie, but they keep saying it. And so that's the pretext. The Trump administration has been regularly and consistently tightening the 6-decade-old embargo in Cuba in recent months, with the stated purpose of cutting off income to Cuba and demanding its cut ties with Venezuela. Washington has barred U.S. cruise ships visiting Cuba, sanctioned all tankers moving petroleum from Venezuela to Cuba, and permitted lawsuits against foreign companies profiting from their use of property confiscated from Americans or from Cubans who later obtained American citizenship right after the revolution. This is very dangerous what is happening right now. And you know, they are definitely suffering tremendously because of all this policy. At the same time, we know how determined the Cuban government and the Cuban people are, and they overcome this crisis, we're pretty sure. Last week, the U.S. Commerce Department ended licenses to any country leasing planes to Cuba, and just a couple of days ago, the State Department said that it will stop all flights from going to cities in Cuba, sparing Havana, but we don't know for how long. I would be remiss in closing without mentioning the courageous struggle of the Haitian people who have been in the street in perpetual protest for months against poverty and the corrupt government of Jovenel Moise. In understanding what is going on in Latin America, it is important to follow the progressive independent news sources to stay informed about the behind-the-scene operation the U.S. and his allies are conducting to undermine and snuff out countries pursuing independence and cooperative directions. We can see that the real key is solidarity of those in motion in the street who have had enough. I forgot to mention Mexico. I think we have to mention Mexico as a hope too. You probably know that Mexico has a new president, and despite all the problems, as you know, many years ago, a president said, "Poor dear Mexico, so far away from God and so close to the United States." They have had enough of the model. I mean, all these countries that are right now rising up, they have enough of the model of inequality and repression. They know it doesn't work, and they reject it, and we should too. Just to end, I wanted to say that the role for us in the United States is not to tell people of those countries what to do. I'm sure you're not one of those, but there are many people that think they have the right to tell them what to do. Our role in the United States is to stand in solidarity with all the countries in Latin America that are fighting for independence and fight the government of the United States for going after those countries. Thank you very much.